So Zack Snyder, he was on the Joe Rogan Experience, which is the Joe Rogan podcast. There, a lot of people talking about his appearance on there, different things they talked about. It's a long one. It's like 2 hours long. Basically, you can watch all of basically the Joss Whedon Justice League in that shit time, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
As I can say, though, I will say, for like shit that's been said on the Joe Rogan podcast, what Zack Snyder said, not even breaking like the top 10 of like the most craziest things someone has said on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
That's probably true. So we're gonna talk about his Batman take first, and then we're gonna get into some kind of the other stuff that he said there. And let me play the clip right here of him talking about good old Batman. This is 29 seconds long. I'm gonna play also a longer clip after this one, but this kind of summarizes a little bit of to add more context to. I'm gonna play a longer clip, but this kind of also just kind of basically summarizes a lot of what he was talking about there on it. So let me do this.
People are always like, well, Batman can't kill, right? So Batman can't kill is canon. And I'm like, okay, well, the first thing I want to do when you say that is I want to see what happens. And they go like, well, don't put him in a situation where he has to kill someone. I'm like, well, that's just like you're protecting your God in a weird way, right? You're making your God irrelevant if he can't be in that situation.
So that was kind of one of the quotes, especially the quote that kind of passed around a lot of headlines there.
Mm-hmm.
Ready for him, Tree said his laugh was worse than Seth Rogen. Yeah, he kind of like, yeah, he kind of got stuck there for a second. But yeah, he was saying that you're making Batman irrelevant if you can't kill. And I'm going to play a longer version of that clip too as well. But what do you all think about the general sentiment? I know Dusk, did you watch some of the interview?
I watched the clips. I saw that scene. I've watched his comments about Batman and his work on the studio and Rebel Moon and all that.
Yeah. So what's your thinking of that?
I'll say what I've always said about Zack Snyder. I think he's a very passionate director. I think he's very passionate about what he writes and directs, and he clearly has a lot of energy and passion. I do respect that he clearly does have a respect for the fans, as he is apparently one of them. He's a big fan of those. I just think, unfortunately, he focuses on the wrong aspects of these characters, and I do think he kind of gets in his own head a little bit, and that causes him to make misjudgments. And I'll get that more into later when he starts talking about the studio system, and Joe Rogan starts, giving his own opinion, which, he's like Joe Rogan makes his own opinions, and sometimes he's sometimes he's right on the mark, and then, like anyone else, sometimes I think he's not getting the full context, and so he's just talking on one side.
Yeah. Ray from Maturity said, did you grab a clip of him saying he wants to make a 300 prequel series about the Spartans sleeping with young children while training them? I do have that clip. I have that clip as well.
Yeah.
He talked about 300 as well.
Yeah.
And the podcast, you know what I mean? It kind of, it's podcast where you jump around all these different topics.
Yeah.
They talk about like weightlifting in it. They talk about the studio system in it.
I'll say this. He was very knowledgeable about bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And that did not kind of surprise me, considering how much he loves a built Batman, and that, like Frank Miller, he sees Batman as basically the peak of humanity in a physical form. He talked about like, I got Ben Affleck because Ben Affleck is 6'4", and then you could put him in a muscle suit and get him really pumped, and then he can be this just Goliath that can just defeat anyone. Which, I mean, yeah, Batman's never been that completely, but sure, I'll let you play the clip.
Yeah, this is him just talking about Frank Miller because he loves Dark Knight.
Oh, he loves Frank Miller.
Loves what Frank Miller has done with Batman and that character.
Dark Knight Returns, there's a scene where, and I copied it kind of in Batman vs. Superman, where he grabs the M60, he busts through the wall, and he grabs the M60, and he's like, the guy's like, in the comic book, he's like got this kid. The mutant has this kid with a gun to his head, and he's like, I'll kill him, I swear I'll do it. And Batman says, I believe you. And he shoots him straight in the head, because it's like a no-win scenario. It's like the Kobayashi Maru of, the Kobayashi Maru is that in Star Trek, it's that test they put Kirk through where there's a no-win. right? Because they want to see how you'll react, right? So they say, okay, we're gonna make a scenario, a test scenario where you don't win, where there's no way to win. And in that situation, we find out what you would do in a no-win situation. Because if you're going to be the commander of this spaceship, you're going to be in situations where, it's life or death. And especially,
I'm going to play a little bit of it later. Yeah. So you kind of have that. He loves Frank Miller, loves a lot of the imagery of Frank Miller. You see that in a lot of the times where he's directed Batman and his Batman movies there. You see it like the image. I think he also copied the image of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns, where he's like he jumps up in the sky and he does the pose and strike with the moon and the lightning hits. He did that. I think he loves a lot of the imagery, as Radiant Maturity said. He definitely loves a lot of Frank Miller's imagery, but I don't think he maybe understands what goes into the character of Batman, especially at that stage of Batman, when he's much in his older life and why he's at that point. So my opinion on Batman killing, and this was the scene which was also played side by side in the clip of him talking there. And I think this scene is great. And I think this scene is one of the best scenes in the movie. And this is from Batman v Superman here. I don't like Batman to kill. In all the movies, people said basically Batman has killed, like Michael Keaton killed.
Oh, yeah.
I think Val Kilmer, did he kill anybody?
Probably.
He threw the coins up and Two-Face fell to his death.
Do we count that? Is
kind of?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. I also like with Michael Keaton's Batman. It's just like Tim Burton. Just like he's never read the comics. He had a vague idea. No, yeah, it's like it's just a different universe, and it's like it's fine. Like it's not the biggest deal to me.
Yeah. Christian Bale, his Batman, he would kind of somewhat just let people die.
Yeah.
I mean, well, he did kill kind of like the whole all the students at the place he was training at Batman.
Oh, yeah.
He was like,
I won't get out.
Yeah, he was like, I'm not gonna kill this man, but I'm gonna blow up this whole place.
and of course, the greatest Batman of all, Pete Holmes.
Yeah.
League of Shadows. Mind your surroundings. They're sleeping.
Robert Pattinson also, I mean, it could be argued that he kind of killed, because people talk about the highway stuff. It's like, oh, that's kind of dicey. I mean, he didn't really kill anybody there, but a lot of adaptations of Batman, you will see, he's kind of
someone dying. Yeah.
Someone dying indirectly, maybe directly there. But I don't like Batman to kill because if he becomes this murderous monster, somebody put a point, it's like, no one's ever explained to me, if Batman can kill people, why is any of Batman's rogue gallery around? Why is the Joker around? Why is Harley Quinn around? Why is the Riddler around? Why is Penguin around? Clayface?
It's the whole Jason Todd argument. That's what makes the Red Hood such a great
movie
and dissection. It's a great conversation. Is Red Hood's got a point. Red Hood absolutely has a point, and he even makes an example. He's like, I'm not even talking about Two-Face. I'm not talking about the Penguin. I'm not talking about Victor Freeze. I'm not talking about anything else. I'm just talking about the Joker. I'm just talking about a guy who literally doesn't care, who's basically a monster, who's never going to change, doesn't want to change, hasn't going to change. Just put him down. Yeah. And if you're not going to do it, then I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to stop you.
Yeah. It's kind of also one of those things of what, like, you kind of have to take the concept of the fictional, like, it's fine for, I think it's also fine for, like, fictional characters to have morals, but also, like, if you compare that to, like, it's like, Batman should kill people, it's like, okay, it's like, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a line to be drawn, but it's like, if you have, like, a vigilante going around being literally judge, jury, and executioner, you're close to getting to, like, the Punisher territory, and, like, really bad cops, or who are, like, really idolize the Punisher and stuff like that. Like, the Punisher has a huge neo-Nazi fan base. Like, let's not forget about that. Like, and there's definitely that element. So it's just like, it's like you could just have a man who doesn't believe in killing for himself in this fantasy world. Like, that's fine. It's like you could also have a complete psychopath like the Punisher. That's like a unrequited power fantasy for dudes. It's like the Punisher is like super unrealistic as well, but
and this is the Red Hood. So this is good DC animated film as well.
John DiMaggio.
John DiMaggio is the voice of the Joker. So this is, I think this perfectly kind of explains why Batman, isn't a killer here. So he's
give the boy points. He came all the way back from the dead to make this shindig happen. So, who's got a camera? Ooh, get one of me and the kid first. Then you and me, then the three of us. And then one with the crowbar. Then...
Jeez.
You'll be as quiet as possible, or I'll put one in your lap first.
And that's Jason Eccles there from Supernatural.
Oh
Did a
yeah,
great- did a
amazing.
great job.
Ignoring what he's done in the past. Blindly, stupidly disregarding the entire graveyards he's filled. The thousands who have suffered. The friends he's crippled. You know, I thought I'd be the last person you'd ever let him hurt. If it had been you that he'd beat to a bloody pulp, if he had taken you from this world, I would have done nothing but search the planet for this pathetic pile of evil death-worshipping garbage and send him off to hell.
You don't understand.
And that's Bruce
I don't think
Greenwood.
you ever understood.
What? What, your moral code just won't allow for that? It's too hard to cross that line?
No, God Almighty, no. It'd be too damned easy. All I've ever wanted to do is kill him. A day doesn't go by when I don't think about subjecting him to every horrendous torture he's dealt out to others, and then end him.
Aw, so you do think about me.
But if I do that, if I allow myself to go down into that place, I'll never come back.
Yeah. So I think that kind of sums up there, why he doesn't, why he has that kind of strict code there, and why he does the things that he does not kill and has that killing rule there. And yeah, and Zack Snyder has a different interpretation of the character of how he feels, which is fine. That he has that. I just think, like I said, it just doesn't make sense. If you're gonna make him this big killer, why does he have this rogues gallery, and why does he keep all these other villains around?
You know what I would kind of want Zack Snyder to do? I would kind of want him to do what Sam Raimi did when Sam Raimi wanted to make the Shadow movie, infamously.
Oh,
and
yeah,
he didn't get the rights to do it. Yeah, he made the Darkman. Like, he just made his own character. Like, go ahead. Yeah, I would love to see Zack Snyder just make his own, basically, superhero character, essentially.
Go
It's like,
carte blanche. Do whatever
yeah.
you want.
yeah, I mean, he's got the fandom.
Yeah. Oh boy, does he. That was one of the most interesting things, was seeing those clips and then looking at the comments. The amount of fanboying for Zack Snyder was amazing. It was amazing to watch. Just no matter how much he's done, no matter what stuff he's worked on, he has a dedicated fan base who loves it and is really pissed that they're not going to get any more of their version of the Justice League, of these characters. It's never going to fully get off the ground.
Yeah. And I know in the interview he talked about his recent movie Rebel Moon, and I think I saw a headline where he talked about he said that more people probably saw Rebel Moon than Barbie, because I think he's going with, like, you have to think about it. If basically if almost two people are watching Netflix and you put that in the theaters and you multiply it, you really think like it's probably it would make more money than Barbie, which Barbie was one of the most successful movies of last year, made over $1 billion there.
Though, so like, are we not counting Barbie streaming?
Yeah, I don't know the streaming numbers for what Barbie was there. I don't know how well it did also in streaming numbers. But yeah, this is the article kind of talking about it. It says Zack Snyder appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience, championed his recent pivot to Netflix. The 58-year-old filmmaker spent the bulk of his career making movies at Warner Brothers. He made the jump to streaming starting with 2021. Release of his zombie action movie Army of the Dead. Snyder's latest Netflix original Rebel Moon, which debuted in December and kicked off a new space saga for streaming giant. A second Rebel Moon film arrives this spring. During the 2-hour conversation with Joe Rogan, Snyder marveled at the recent Netflix and compared to traditional film studios. He ran some math to prove his point and deduced that Rebel Moon, despite being panned by film critics, probably got seen by more people than Greta Gerwig's Barbie, a box office powerhouse with $1.4 billion worldwide, which made it the highest grossing film of 2023 and Warner Brothers' top grosser in history. Yeah, he said you think about Netflix, for instance, where you push a button. Snyder said Rebel Moon, right? You say right now it's almost 90 million views right now, right? 80 or 90 million accounts turned on, give or take. They assume 2 viewers per screening, right? So that's the math. So you think if that movie was in the theater with a distribution model, like that's 160 million people supposedly watching based on that math, 160 million people, $10 ticket, that would be, what is that math? I don't know. 160 million times 10, that's 1.6 billion. So more people probably saw Rebel Moon than saw Barbie in the theater, right? Yeah, I guess if you go with that math, I guess maybe. I mean,
Sure, but views don't necessarily translate to box office tickets.
yeah. I mean, people you can't translate that because people who already have a Netflix account who just,
Right.
want to turn it on, like, oh, I just want to watch something, doesn't mean that if they have to now pay for a ticket to go see it to get out their
Exactly.
house, that doesn't always mean that. Yeah. So I wouldn't necessarily, agree with that, but okay. Yeah. And we had our opinion about Rebel Moon. I didn't really too much like Rebel Moon.
No.
But yeah, I mean, but there's that. Um, yeah. Any final thoughts on the whole Batman situation before I move on to another clip, Mike or Dusk? Or anything?
I don't care.
Zack Snyder has a very specific opinion. He's gonna have his own opinions about how things went or how his views on it. I think he really does love the DC universe. I think he really does care. He does in his own way, but I also think he fundamentally doesn't understand why he likes something or how it works. I think he loves it for what it is, but he just can't capture it.
Mm. Let me move on to his Spartan take here. That was another one that people talked about here. Let me play this one. You guys have probably seen this one.
Keys, where like all these Spartan warriors would stand around the table, and all the 13-year-olds who were ready to like transition to becoming true Spartans, you'd have to like try and get and pull a piece of cheese off this stone table, and the Spartan warriors who guarded the table could do anything to stop you. And it was just like just beating the crap out of these 13-year-olds. And finally, like, if you got it, then you were given to a Spartan soldier who raised you. And basically the idea was that he was your lover, he was your teacher, he was everything to you. Because the Spartans believed that, really they believed that you would die for your brother if you were also lovers. They thought that like, if you were confused about why we're fighting, fight for that guy who's not only your best buddy, there's like a story, I guess, where they were like when the Persians first came, they sent a scout over and they looked down at the Spartans right the night before the big battle. And he went back and he goes, they were all like having sex with each other. It was like a weird, like they're like, we're going to be good. And there was one of the Spartans kings the old Spartan king was now working with the Persians and said like, oh no, we're fucked. They're saying goodbye to each other. Do you know what that means? Like, we're completely screwed. Like they're
So he gets into kind of that, his kind of takes there, and they have a moment in the podcast they talk about Spartan history. I'm not a historian on the Spartans, so I wouldn't know. I don't know if either of you guys are, but he also talks about like with Spartans, like when they got married, the women would cut their hair and then fight their husband because the Spartans couldn't get aroused unless they were fighting men.
So some of that is 100% true. No, honestly, he's 100% correct on some of those aspects. Spartan culture was very strange, even for historically speaking, Greece was not one unified country.
Yeah.
It was a bunch of separate states. So that's why the Athens were different than the Spartans. They were also different from the ones from Thebes. They were different from those people. It wasn't really until certain conquistors, like the father of Alexander Great, who came in and tried to unify Greece as a whole. Frank Miller also did the 300 comic, where he basically just copied imagery straight from the comic book, famously from 300. So in historical aspects, he's not entirely wrong. However, I think a lot of that was also the fantasy built around Spartans, so that they could let their enemies think whatever they want of them. Other Greeks to let them think of what they wanted of them, because that just enhanced the legend even further. So it's kind of a mix and match. Some of this is true. Some of it is a little bit played up. I don't necessarily know if that's necessarily true. There is the one thing I do know, and like there's a famous quote before Sparta went for a battle. There was one Spartan mother said to her son,
"This is Sparta."
No, she said something in Greek that basically came out as either home on a horse or on a shield. So basically, she was telling him, "Go, either you come back dead or a victor. Don't come back either way. If you don't come back of either of those things, you either come back as dead or you come back to me as a victor." So that's how hardcore Spartans were. And it is also true that Spartans would, if they felt you were the child was weak or the baby wouldn't be strong, they would just leave it out in the woods. They just let it die.
I haven't seen Zack Snyder's 300 in a while. It's been some years since I've seen it. I mean, I remember the cool imagery of it. I mean, I saw this when I was a kid. I haven't really seen it much since there. I just remember that. I know Sage from Radio Maturity, he hates this movie. He says, like he says, the depictions of the Persians never sit right with him in this movie. So he has
to be fair to Zack Snyder, and I never thought I'd say that, but to be fair to him, a lot of his imagery comes straight from Frank Miller's work of 300.
Yeah.
Right, page from page. So if you don't like his imagery, you're probably not going to like Zack Snyder. You're not going to like Frank Miller's, because his imagery is very similar. He basically just took it from page to film.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's very close.
Yeah. And you see that. I mean, great at making a shot. His cinematography is always kind of strong in a lot of
Sure.
movies. It's just the story wise.
When he's not using antiquated
Save
80s
for-
lenses that have dirt on them.
What were you gonna say, Mike?
Army of Darkness. That was a very weird movie, but it might have been the pandemic. There was also like that one comedian who he just cut out the movie because he was like a
Oh, you mean Army of the Dead? You said
Army of the Dead. Yeah, sorry, but like there's that one comedian he had to cut out because he was a creep in real life.
Yeah.
So they replaced him with Tig Norton.
Yeah, I think that's her name.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what was it, Chris D'Elia who they replaced, right?
Yeah. He was like texting underage girls and shit like that. It's like,
Very, very apropos for Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
And then one last clip I have here. This is him talking about what he kind of wanted to scene that he wanted in Watchmen that he didn't end up getting here. So let's see.
There was a scene that we did in that movie where because Rorschach's mom was a prostitute, right? So there's that scene where Rorschach's mom in the flashbacks, like, I should have had that abortion, right? And she slaps him in the face, right? Because he hears, Mom, is he hurting you? Like, because she's having sex with some John in there. And then she opens the door and she's like, he's like, is he hurting you? I should have had that abortion, slapped him. And I had wanted the mother to be topless in that scene. And they were like, you can't have, because his mother was visiting set that day. And his mom was there, and she was like, "Oh, putting our son in a movie." Like, we weren't together at the time, his mom and I, but we're really close friends. But like, she was an actress, and I said, and they went, "The only way that the woman can be topless is if it was actually his mom." And I was like, "Oh," I go, "Denise." She was like, "No chance."
Okay,
That explains a lot, actually.
Don't think that probably was really necessary, really all that much, but
a lot of what I heard in this podcast, a lot of it was like, I've always thought, hey, Zach, you have a lot of interesting ideas, but you definitely need somebody to tell you no. And the more popular he got, the less no he got. And he also talks about, like Joe Rogan talks about it. It's like, oh yeah, the studio system screw everything up. And so I'm like, I do agree the studio system is a little too clutches their pearls too much sometimes, or makes some like bad decisions, or cuts things that are stupid. Like the whole thing, we don't like the idea of Batman fighting Superman. Like, that's the whole movie. That's what you're selling. You can't, like, that's stupid. However, they're there for a reason. They are there for a reason. And sometimes the ideas that Zack Snyder comes up with, you're like, what does this have to do at all? What is this adding into the scene? Maybe don't do that.
That just seems like really kind of unnecessary. Don't really see the point of that. And then a lot of his movies sometimes it's just like, I think he struggles with kind of 15-year-old brain. Like, that was a lot of like
Yes.
Sucker Punch, like
Oh
I
yeah.
think Sucker Punch is his worst movie by far. I really don't like Sucker Punch at all.
I think it had the least amount of people telling him no until he did Rebel Moon.
Yeah, and yeah, Sucker Punch. If you've never seen Sucker Punch, I think
Yeah.
that's terrible.
Don't.
It's
I've
like
seen behind the scenes though. Apparently, like everyone's like, oh, it was like they had a lot of fun working on it. It's like,
Oh
yeah,
sure, I'm sure.
I have
they had a
nothing
lot of
against
fun.
it. Yeah, Zack Snyder's like a perfectly lovely man. Like, and I would rather I would take a nice, maybe not great filmmaker over a fucking Hollywood creep any day.
Sure.
over. You rather take him over Bryan Singer or
Oh,
Brett
yeah.
Ratner.
Oh,
or,
yeah.
Brett
you know.
Ratner, Brett the Rat Ratner.
Yeah,
Mhm.
So I think he's. I mean, even though
He's talented, I think.
yeah, he seems like a cool guy to have beer with, sit down, chill
Sure.
out.
Again, he just needs someone to tell him no.
Yeah, I just have that, and during this whole thing, this when he was on the podcast, it was kind of banal, honestly. I mean, it was kind of a lot of stuff. It was interesting to him to talk about some stuff, and it's a little bit of rambling because it's kind of off the top of his head.
Yeah,
It seems
sure.
like, and I don't really think Joe Rogan's a very strong interviewer. Really, I don't really think he asks that
No,
interesting
he
questions.
lets kind of people just talk about whatever they want to talk about.
Yeah,
I have been kind of obsessed with watching Andrew Bowser, the guy who makes Onyx the Fortuitous videos, basically inserting himself into Joe Rogan videos and just see the bizarre shit Joe Rogan says. It's just like, oh yeah, totally.
yeah.
Mhm.
Do you ever watch the stuff where it's like Tim Heidecker and then like he like copies the Joe Rogan, like he makes a parody of it?
I watched it. It's kind of like the same with Joe Rogan. It's like, yeah, I watch it like once or twice, but I was like, I get the gist.
Yeah, that's kind of like that. But yeah, that was kind of Zack Snyder there on the Joe Rogan Experience. There, kind of one of my. I sometimes I'll check out the Joe Rogan stuff because sometimes they'll have maybe an interesting guest that will come on there that will talk about some stuff, and like that kind of works in a way of letting people talk because sometimes people are really good at telling stories and they can transition from one thing to another, and he can kind of just guide them there. And then sometimes maybe you get a little bit of rambling there.
Yeah.
But anything else, Dusty, you want to say about the Joe Rogan interview? Any other thing you want?
I mean, I've talked about Zack Snyder before. This didn't change my opinion. If nothing else, it just confirmed what I already knew.
Mm.
I mean, I've listened to various interviews. I've listened to his commentaries. He seems like a decent guy. I got nothing against him personally. I don't approve of what the studio system did to him during the Justice League, but I do think he was the wrong choice for that. I just think his version, he doesn't necessarily understand Batman. He thinks Batman's cool, and the way he describes these superheroes as if they're gods, it's like, no, it's in their humanity and their heroism that we find that I think you fundamentally don't understand that aspect, or you see one very specific part of it. But that's neither here nor there. It's his opinions. He seems like a decent guy, but he has such a strong fan base, and those fans are going to love him no matter what he says or what he does.
Yeah, and he does talk about that in one part of the interview there where he mentions like the haters there and the people that he has a strong fan base, but also has a strong people that hate him, and because they don't like his movies, it kind of translates to hating him as a person. And I see some of it. It's a clash between people. When you have stands, you're gonna have people who are anti-stands going up against because maybe your stands are annoying, or maybe your stands are there because you have people who are so vehemently anti Zack Snyder, and so they clash all the time. So you do kind of see that there. But I don't think he's a terrible director. I like some of the stuff I like maybe more movies than not. I think still his best movie is still, Dawn of the Dead, I think, still, which is
Which
funny.
he did not write.
Yes, James Gunn wrote that. It's funny enough, like that's
Yeah.
always the two fan bases going at war is like James Gunn and Zack Snyder. And James Gunn wrote a movie for Zack Snyder there with Dawn of the Dead. And those two things are going at each other. So yeah. And Rated Maturity said he's 13 going on 60.
Yes.
And he is almost 60 years old, but he looks good.
Yeah, he looks
No, he looks damn good for his age.
He looks really good. Yes, you can tell he works out, trains a lot. So yeah, it looks really good.